They secured higher souls for their children, grandchildren, and descendants for generations to come. Zaidi, you make it seem as though we are like a medieval European regal family, when people believed that God chose the king. It's not like we are royalty, I said. No, that is exactly what we are, Zaidi interrupted. That is exactly what I'm telling you. Being direct descendants of the holy Baal Shem Tov means that we are like princes. I rolled my eyes and gave Zaidi a look that said, yeah, right. He smiled. Our sages have said that if the Baal Shem Tov had lived in biblical times, he would have been a patriarch. He would have been a Moses, and we would have counted him among Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Imagine his power. And now imagine how holy the souls of his descendants are. What the story about the fetter meant was that this illustrious lineage came down to us from multiple sources. It was not just Zaidi's mother and his uncle who descended from the Baal Shem Tov. Zaidi's father-in-law, the father of Rabbi Stein, my grandmother, had a significant lineage in Judaism as well. The complexities of my ancestry were as confounding as they were supposedly impressive. I didn't believe most of what Zaidi said about our regal stature. But by then, I was 15 years old and questioning everything I was told about religion. Besides, learning that I was somehow holier than others, which in turn meant I had to act holier, was not something I was interested in doing. But I also knew that among the 1 million or so Hasidic people in the Ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jewish world, it was considered a reality. Geographically, I was born and raised in New York City. Culturally, I was raised in an 18th-century Eastern European enclave in the heart of its capital, the Ultra-Orthodox Hasidic Jewish community in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. I grew up in New York, but I did not speak English, visit museums or the theater, or wear jeans. Popular culture from television to newspapers to the internet was shunned. Britney Spears and the Beatles were not only forbidden, but didn't even exist for me. I hadn't heard of Friends or Seinfeld or many major historical events, from Woodstock to the Stonewall riots. They were spurned topics, and we were kept from ever learning about them. After Nazi Germany invaded Poland, the Hasidic community was all but decimated, and a few thousand families came as refugees to the United States. In New York, several Hasidic rabbis settled in Brooklyn with a hard task in front of them: rebuilding the Hasidic community from scratch. Undaunted, they set out to recreate Eastern European Hasidic shtetl life. For the first time, the majority of Hasidic Jews were no longer living in countries where Jews were oppressed, at least not politically. Until World War I, about half of Hasidic Jews lived in Tsarist Russia, where they were confined to the infamous, poverty-ridden Pale of Settlement, which was Catherine the Great's attempt to segregate the Jews from the rest of the Russian population. Others were living under the Austro-Hungarian Empire, where they had more freedom, but the government still exercised control over their affairs. In New York, for the first time in its 200 years of existence, the Hasidic community was living in a country that had formal separation between church and state, and where the government rarely, at least by law, took an interest in religious communities. Not only were Jews no longer treated as outcasts, but they were reaching a new peak of influence, integration, and assimilation in the American melting pot. But the outside world posed a threat, and Orthodox Jews found themselves as a tiny minority among the predominantly secular Jewish American community. So, the Hasidic community added new guardrails to its own culture. In addition to creating a lifestyle that resembled life in Europe as much as possible, the food they ate, the clothing they wore, the language they spoke, the Hasidim in America developed new concepts that now came into play. While most Hungarian Jews from my grandparents' generation spoke fluent Hungarian in addition to Yiddish, their children and grandchildren